42-year-old Samson Mensah, life along the banks of the Wager Dam is a constant struggle. Every controlled spillage brings the same hardship. Floodwaters force his family indoors, prevent him from going to work, and keep his children out of school. Yet, moving away is not an option. Samson explains that years of investments in the land leave them with no choice but to endure the harsh reality whenever the dam spills.
Situation na wo munintie bia wo go back to baby a wo free buy e bia first kwa na wo rented house ene bia wa abeji wo plot na wo wie bibi kakra na abanesa wo ya ho bibi anyeye.
But managers of the Wager Dam insist the spillage, though disruptive, is unavoidable. The Public Relations Officer of the Ghana Water Limited, Stanley Marty, explains that the annual controlled release is a critical safety measure to protect the dam from structural failure.
That if we do not spill the excess water from the dam and there's a dam break, the repercussions will be more disastrous than when we are spilling.
Samson is not alone in facing this dilemma. Gideon Yeboah, who lives in the community with his wife and 2 children, says his child misses school for weeks, not because of financial difficulties, but because floodwaters make their home inaccessible. For Gideon, relocating is not an option. The land, he says, was acquired by his father, and protecting it is a responsibility he must uphold.
Mu bi ensu na nkwala ni ntumi nko school bi wa me ba na ofia kosi week na ensu no betwe no ha na de me father na beto asase no 7 plot 20 onya beto awie na wo kase utu nsu asase ne da ho obi be ba befa.
However, emergency officials say such attachments are making disaster response increasingly difficult. The National Disaster Management Organization, NADMO, has attributed the severity of recent spillages to climate change. Officials say changing rainfall patterns have caused the Wager Dam to reach full capacity much earlier than expected in the past 2 years, forcing more intense spillages and complicating evacuation efforts due to continuous human settlements around the dam.
Climate change is a phenomenon that has come to be acknowledged worldwide, and the extremes, that is too much water, too much dryness, and then sometimes heat, extreme heat, are causes of concern for us, because too much water then causes the floods that we deal with. The lack of it will also bring about the drought.
For some residents, the floods leave no room for attachment or choice. Abdullahi Ayamdago, a commercial motorbike rider who has lived in the community for close to 5 years, says worsening conditions have forced him to temporarily relocate to protect his life and property.
When they opened the dam, they enter inside my room and spoil my things. My dresses all was wet, and that's why I decided to live here.
In response to calls for better management, authorities say solutions must go beyond emergency relief. The Ghana Water Limited maintains that while the Wager Dam spillage is unavoidable, stricter enforcement of land use regulations remains key to reducing the impact on communities downstream.
For us as Ghana Water Company Limited, we can only appeal to them. But for those who are in charge of enforcing the law, I don't think they should act as Ghana Water will. They should get onto the ground and ensure that people who are built in unauthorized places are clearly are cleared from that area or evacuated, and all structures demolished.
For the residents of Tetegu, the waters may eventually recede, but the broader challenge remains. As climate change intensifies and urban encroachment continues, the balance between safeguarding critical national infrastructure and protecting vulnerable communities grows increasingly fragile. Until long-term solutions are enforced, life along the banks of the Wager Dam will remain a cycle of fear, loss, and resilience. Grace, Aqua, and Ramat Bashiru's report. This story is brought to you by JoyNews in partnership with CDKN Ghana, University of Ghana Center for Climate Change and Sustainability Studies, with funding from Claire R41 Opportunities Fund.
Well, there's just this woman, if you see, you just know that something good is about to happen on our screens. MFA Ewenam Etemwa Eli, she is lead strategic partnerships and projects here at the Joy News, not just the Joy News, but Joy Brands MGL. And Dr. Prince Ansa is country lead CDKN Ghana. We also have partners, of course. Dr. Shelter Gachi is research fellow, University of Ghana, Legon. We also have another research fellow, which I just would be introducing. Dr. Yao Ajiman Boafo will be joining us via Zoom. And as well, Grace O. O'Donovan is program manager, Claire R4I Opportunities Fund, South North as well. We also have our reporters. Kofi Edu Domfe is head climate and environment desk. Join News here. Benedicta Ohenewa Asamwa is a journalist, KTU Radio from the Eastern region. Lady, doctors, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me here in studio. MFA, I'll pretend I don't know what's going on. I'll just pretend, please. Tell me about the series and what gap it really seeks to want to close.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. So, Climate Evidence is our latest series of climate reporting here on the Joy News platform and Joy FM, as well as all our social media platforms. Of course, we have been leading the conversations and journalism content when it comes to climate change. You can't take that away from us, yeah. So yes, this is the latest on the block, and we're excited to be doing this. In the next couple of months, we are going to be airing different kinds of stories, all climate-centered, but most importantly, largely, we want to highlight the interventions. In the past, we have done a lot of stories, largely complaining, telling people about the impact, how people are reeling under the effects of climate change. Point is, so they are dying, they don't have a place to sleep, they can't grow their crops, and all of that. The heat is chasing them out of their comfort zones. In all of these, what is the way out for them? So this series is largely going to focus on that. Thankfully, with the support of the Climate and Development Network Ghana and Claire R4I Opportunities Fund from the South North, and the University of Ghana, which is the C3SS, which is Climate Change Center for Sustainability Studies, University of Ghana. They are supporting us to be able to do this. It is a concerted effort. It's not one. This series of stories we are bringing to you are evidence-based. They are backed with research. So it's not just about reporters going out there finding maybe there's a flat situation and on a regular news day you want to report. But you want to know what is the underlying factor. And at the end of the day, how can we educate the public, though the victims, so they are able to know how to find their way out of the situation they are in. That is what we are bringing to you in the next couple of months on Joy News, Joy FM, and myjoyonline.com, as well as on all our social media platforms.
I definitely look forward to that. I'll come to you both in studio, but I'm just going to go to Zoom first and speak to Grace. Grace, thank you for joining us on Zoom this morning. So for you as an entity, tell me why you decided to partner to bring this project to fruition. What the evidence that these projects is going to be providing, what are you hoping to achieve with it? And does it fit in your broader goal and objective as well?
Thanks so much for that, and pleasure to be here. So I am with South North, as you mentioned, and it's a climate NGO in Cape Town, and we are the Research for Impact hub of the FCDO IDRC-funded CLARE program, supporting this project through our Opportunities Fund. And we work with projects that draw on existing evidence and applies that knowledge to long-term outcomes that are sustainable and beneficial for the people who need them most. And so in terms of this project specifically, our main goals are to bring journalists and researchers into conversation, which is extremely unique. As you'll hear a little bit more, I mean, this project links existing evidence from researchers with policy needs and brings us to media channels from journalists across the country, especially in the most vulnerable regions. And so thinking long term, this makes it possible for climate change reporting to lead to resilience building across the country, to communicate the lived experiences of those impacted by climate risk, and provide context-specific, evidence-based narratives that resonate with readers. And so these stories share what we can do to empower local communities and inspire action. And then in terms of broader impact, we also want to enhance awareness about critical climate challenges and potential adaptation solutions. And this really supports the policies like the national adaptation plans and the nationally determined contributions, all of which are important because they outline Ghana's strategic roadmap and commitments to building resilience against climate impacts and integrate adaptation into policies. So from CLARE's perspective, investing in these kinds of projects and by amplifying the voices and perspectives and strategies that local communities are using to adapt, projects like ours can really bring local African knowledge into global conversations about adaptation and resilience and inform long-term and sustainable and context-driven outcomes.
All right, Grace, stay with me. Let me speak to the researchers, because in the heart of this is proper accounts, credibility, how journalists like myself would even have to report the real issues because they reflect on the broader picture of climate adaptation. And so I'll start with you, Dr. Yao Agyemang, for joining us. Thank you for joining us. Tell me the role of research in proper credibility, accuracy in reporting the real climate adaptation stories that we'll be doing.
All right, thank you very much for this opportunity. And I think you captured it very well. Proper and credible stories. What research does is that it makes the climate stories what are called accurate, credible, at the same time very useful and not just speculative. Because climate change is not just one event, okay? It's patterns over time. So without research, the stories risk becoming very emotional but misleading. It can also be dramatic but not so accurate. It can also be loud and then what are called and not helpful. But research helps answer very important questions. I have 3 questions that I think research can help us answer. It helps us answer the question of what is actually changing. And that's something very important. And then the other question is that who is affected the most with this change that is happening? And then the third question that we bring up is that what responses are working? So earlier on when MFA started, she highlighted the importance of bringing the stories of change at the same time, the innovative ideas that are in place to help address these issues. What I think is important is that, for instance, if you look at Accra, when Accra floods, people often say, oh, it's normal rainfall. But research shows that rainfall intensity has increased. And the drainage systems have also reduced. So, and that also means that, flooding is becoming more and more frequent. So that's what is important. So research helps journalists explain why, let's say, floods are happening more often and not just because it's happening.
Right.
And the same applies to many other examples we can point out in other parts of the country.
Okay. Coming back in studio, Dr. Prince Ansah. So you see that policymakers, government, let's just go hit the nail on the head. Governments will take decisions, but usually outside of real evidence-based stories. Why is it important for them to engage with real evidence-based stories, which is what journalists like myself would be doing? Why is it important?
Yes. So thank you so much for that question. I think evidence-based policymaking is really important, more because it helps in terms of long-term sustainable development or long-term resilient building, as we say in climate change terms. Now, this is because, as Dr. Boafo rightly mentioned, the research helps you to understand the issues in a granular form.
Yeah.
And in that particular sense, what it means is that when policies are being drafted, they are also drafted in a very granular way that it targets the specific issues and not in a broader sense of the word. So I think that is why this particular, climate evidence is important, because the researchers who have spent years working on the ground, in different communities, partnering with local journalists to be able to tell the stories in that granular form, stories of resilience, how are communities, developing systems to deal with droughts, how are communities developing systems to deal with flooding. These are important because it helps also give our policymakers signals to where they can invest and where they can actually put their monies at. And these are very important issues. That the other thing I want to say is that when evidence is brought to bear, especially in terms of like using the media as a channel, what it means is that the public is aware, and when budgetary allocations are actually cast for such projects, there is no pushback because people understand the issues in its very finest form, and therefore the support is there for such policies.
That's an excellent answer. So, Shelter is one thing researching, the information is available. There's another thing communicating the accuracy of it. Again, we're the point of reference. But for a researcher like you, how is it important for us to communicate the real evidence-based? This is research-backed. Because if we are not able to communicate, then really, how important is that?
Well, climate evidence is often technical, right? It's complex, and it's often in a particular circle, academic circle or development circle or think tank circle. Often the public or specific audience are detached from what's actually happening on the ground. Now, the media house serves as a bridge with this disconnect, whereas when they make this information in a digestible form of knowledge, so different audiences can have access to policymakers, communities, they know what's happening on the ground. It also gives a human-centered story to the evidence. So, for instance, in one of the stories I worked on, where we are talking about dry spells causing people to migrate from the north to the south.
Yeah.
As researchers, we are going to work with graphs. We are just going to show the graph to show the fluctuation of rainfall patterns and dry spells. But with the journalists, they go to the field, they follow the farmers, and the farmers were telling them about how there has been inadequacy in the rainfall patterns, and why, because of that, their son had to migrate to the south. As a researcher, I'm just going to show the graph. I'm going to interpret the graph. But the journalists brought the human-centered bit to that data.
Yeah.
And when a policymaker sees it, it's not a distance. Because sometimes it's not their fault. They are there's a strong detachment. So it's important that when there's accuracy, credibility, it's not just an emotional bit. It's backed with data that can be replicated, validated. So that's why it's very important.
Thank you so much. I don't know if I have my colleagues via Zoom. Do I have Kofi? Do I have you? I'm curious. What should we expect?
Well, I'm quite excited. Over the years, JoyNews, we've been leading in the climate conversation with our climate focus series, and I'm so excited about this climate evidence initiative. Basically, because of the fact that we know how our researchers have been working, but most of them have the outcomes of their research on the shelves. Hardly do we get to know the realities as expounded at the global level when it comes to climate change. And so what we're doing is to see how we can engage them and bring most of these issues out. In fact, as we speak, Ghana is currently chairing the African group of negotiators as journalists, the impact stories that we've been telling. I think now we want to go deep down there to bring the science behind some of the report we've been doing. And let me say this for a fact. Climate change affects every facet of life. So it's not just about the coastal areas and farmers being impacted that we always talk about. When you talk about road networks today, the Building and Road Research Institute is talking about the fact that even the bitumen that we're currently using to asphalt our roads, they may no longer be able to resist the intensity of the heat.
Okay.
There are implications on health. we talk about issues related to currently people having their windscreens cracking and they cannot explain why it's happening at this time. So I'm so excited that even though the realities of climate change is here and the science talks about it, we need now to go deep down to the researchers and engage them to really tell how people can be resilient, take advantage of the opportunities they're in building resilience, and of course, drive policy to make the right decisions for national development.
Thank you, Kofi. Benedict, I'll come to you, but stay and hang in there for me. Let me come back to you, Grace, if you can hear me. Is one thing championing evidence-based climate-focused stories, and then we come up with recommendations, and then when it is implemented, maybe it's unsustainable. For you as a partner, what kind of long-term impact and sustainable results are you hoping to see after this?
So for us, investing in this kind of evidence-based climate storytelling, it serves to bridge a gap between science and policy and lived experience. And this really does serve to help policymakers and their partners make decisions that ultimately strengthen the adaptation and resilience of people on the ground in ways that work for them. So long-term impacts and sustainable outcomes are emerge from sharing this evidence through storytelling, and it helps us strengthen the capacity of researchers and journalists going forward to collaborate on spotlighting existing climate evidence across sectors, and that can enhance public awareness and action. And I mean, all the sort of long-term outcomes that emerge from this is around evidence-based storytelling makes climate risks, understandable, so communities can understand what is changing and why, so that decision makers can link these climate risks to concrete choices. Other long-term ones are about building trust and countering misinformation. Evidence-based stories are grounded in peer-reviewed research and data and expertise. It centers, local knowledge and lived experience. It's not just about top-down communication. And ultimately, it also motivates action and not just awareness. I mean, as we've talked about, stories connect, climate impacts to values that we already care about, like health and livelihoods. And more sustainably, hoping that it'll improve policy and investment decisions. It's ultimately about helping policymakers also prioritize the most urgent issues, which are not just technical, but also human and economic imperatives, especially in our current landscape where funding is limited and needs to be well targeted. It also supports equity and climate justice long term, and strengthens learning and adaptive capacity. Adaptation is iterative, and stories really help societies learn from what has worked and what hasn't, and where innovations can be scaled or adapted elsewhere. So this kind of project in the long run, and also what I was saying earlier around hopefully influencing policy, is that it's really essential for communities in Ghana and globally to adapt to climate change impacts. And from our program's perspective, investing in this really enables informed decisions, builds trust and turns knowledge into resilience where it matters most on the ground.
Grace, it's nice to know that as a partner, you recognize that the results would be equitable, because every area would definitely require a very specific or bespoke solution. But let me go to my colleague, Benedicta Ohenewa. You are a journalist from the Eastern region. I was born in the Eastern region, and I recognize the challenges those mountainous areas will bring. But how has your training, the climate evidence-based training that you've had, how has it shaped the stories that we're going to be seeing later?
Okay, so now the stories wouldn't be about us just going out there and then just reporting, but we have evidences that support. So as a journalist from the Eastern region, I'm super excited we are part of this, because with this, policymakers would make decisions that involve the locals. That includes the locals, but wouldn't make decisions from top to down. Going out there to the communities, most of the things the locals are saying is that the things are just brought to them. There are no proper education whatsoever. So they also are accustomed to what they are okay with. So with the kind of training we had, it has helped us, or it has helped me be able to communicate with them, so they voice out issues concerning energy and climate at large.
Benedicta, very well said. Back in studio, before I go to MFA, so that she'll duly launch this for us. But maybe before, Dr. Ajman, let me come to you. I'll take your final words, which you need to say before I come in studio. Do I still have Dr. Ajman Boafo on? Can you unmute?
Yes, I'm right there.
Perfect.
Yes.
I'll take your final words.
Yes, well, what I think it's important about this collaboration is that, the collaboration connects science, storytelling, and society. Because climate change sits at the intersection of what I would call science, livelihood, politics, development, and my panelists have highlighted that very well. So no single group can communicate it effectively alone. And so that's why this collaboration, I think, is important, and we have to keep engaging each other to ensure that, the research that we do, brings the data out, it shows all the long term, and then the human stories are also told effectively. So I think this is a very important platform, and it's just the beginning of, many of such platforms to come and encourage, media houses all across the country and the world to be more effective in, drawing on these experiences for us to ensure that the national adaptation system that we put in place are effective, and also they address the issues that we face. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ajman Boafo. Doc, back in studio. It's nice to have a doctor sitting quite closer to me. Well, in wrapping this conversation, in all of it, how are you expecting that the country, or if not, policymakers can prioritize the results that these stories that we're going to be airing, how can they prioritize it so that we can see it when we zoom in, microscopic, see that it is showing up in policies that we'll be coming up with?
Yes, thank you so much. So evidence is very important, and as we well, much know, you can't just, when you are sick and you don't know what exactly is wrong with you, you go to the doctor, you get lab tests, you diagnose it, and then they come up with the results, and they tell you that it's because of A, B, and C. The same thing with climate evidence. It helps us to diagnose the environmental issues, the climate impact, and then help us to be able to have targeted policies that affect, various groups of people, whether it's children, whether it's women groups, which equity conversation have, whether it's farmers in different ways. So it's very, very important that evidence actually speaks, in most of our conversation. And I would also want to say that that is what, the CDKN, which is Climate and Development Knowledge Network, we have been, doing, which is connecting, evidence or researchers to whether it's media. We've done it with creatives, we've done it with entrepreneurs, we've done it with, different sets of group of people to make sure that the evidence speaks, and then the evidence is what policymakers also use in terms of drafting policies, for the country.
Dr. Ansah, thank you. Shelter, you've heard all of them. You've heard Grace, you've heard Dr. Ajman Boafo, you've also heard Dr. Ansah now. Put it all together for me. Okay. Your final words.
The thing at the ground is, with journalists and researchers, there's something that we share. There's a commonality that I didn't realize until this, our quest for knowledge and our curiosity, getting to the root cause of the problem and not stopping at anything to get there. And that is something that researchers also have. Now, coming together, researchers and the media houses to identify the root cause of climate change, and not only the focus on the interventions at hand, is a good cause. First of all, the researchers has limited reach, whether we like it or not. And most of the time, the words are technical. Now, with the journal, working hand the journal, the journalists know the groundwork. They know how to communicate to people. They have access to different audiences. This project, for instance, we use the online platform, we use the TV, and we use, I think, another radio as well. And that is reaching different households, different classes of people. Now, we need to expand this platform. Other media houses need to adopt it. We can also bring other stakeholders on board, because when we utilize this platform, we are going to have, as I mentioned, context-specific solutions. Policymakers are going to have gender-responsive solutions to specific communities. You mentioned that you're in the eastern region. Often when we are talking about climate change, you usually focus on the north.
Yeah.
But it's also happening.
Very foggy over there. Well, I'm certain that we'll hear more, or especially on the back of the stories that we'll be bringing. But MFF, just few seconds, what to expect, and duly launched this for us.
Okay. The exciting bit about this exercise is that in terms of communication, we work a lot with affiliates. And so it's not just going to be English. So the stories that we are airing, they'll be in the local languages in the various communities that the reporters will be visiting. All our affiliates, whichever reporter is reporting from a specific region in a specific radio or TV station, is first expected to produce these contents in the local language so that the local people can understand and know what to do. That is the other exciting bit about it. And so I'd also like to use this opportunity to say a big thank you to the Clear R4I Opportunities Fund, to CDKN, to the C3SS of University of Ghana, Dr. Yao Ajiman Boafo and his team. Shelter here, thank you for making this possible. For us as journalists, it's very demanding on us if we would have to travel to the very interior to bring these stories. But with them coming on board, it's going to make our work very, very easy and exciting. And so we are happy and we are saying thank you, particularly to South North Clear R41 Opportunities Fund. We are grateful.
This means it's duly launched.
It's duly launched.
Thank you.
On Joy News, on Joy FM, Joy Online, on all our social media platforms, as well as all our affiliates. You should also expect explainers, to give you a wrap of everything we are doing.
Don't stress. Trust us on that. But anyway, thank you all so much for joining us. It's duly launched. Please stay for Joy News Next with Mamiesi Nyamiche saying thank you for watching.